Hi guys and girls, welcome to the Goblins Charge process video. I'm going to be covering in this tutorial my process of drawing and painting the goblin, and just want to let you know, like, before I start painting, I usually start with a lot of sketches and drawings, and you can see here I start out drawing a few goblins, and I usually draw, if I'm drawing characters that are very, I suppose, exaggerated and caricatured, I try and draw from my imagination, come up with as many ideas as possible. And you can see the final sketch is very different to the original. This is just one of the first sketches, and I had other doodles that I was developing as I played around with it and got it all sorted. Yeah, and with drawing in Photoshop versus, say, traditional media, the good thing about Photoshop is that it does give you the opportunity to see if things work straight away by flipping the sketch. And a lot of people say, oh, it's cheating, or it's, it makes it a lot easier. It does in ways, because you can play around with stuff, but I mean, also, it also forces you to keep on drawing, because it gives you motivation to think, to say, alright, I can scrap that and then clean up this over here, this ear, as I'm doing right now. And that's the thing with doing paintings and illustrations. If you're doing it traditionally, if you're constantly throwing out original sketches, it does get very wasteful with the paper on the ground. But not just that, you can, I suppose, lose heart, and that's where I think a lot of people give up with traditional stuff. They kind of think, it's too hard. Like, they start drawing out a sketch and then it doesn't work, or they spend all these hours on these drawings and it doesn't work. Whereas with digital, you can very easily delete a drawing and start again. And that's, what I just did. As you could see, I've just gone to the second drawing already. I had a few other drawings before this, like I had like 10 different other ideas, but I just wasn't even happy showing them, and I try not to get too emotionally attached with my drawings until something starts to really pop out at me and resonates with me. Until something really, I say, look at something and go, okay, yeah, I could really work with that, or I'm happy with this as a piece. And this is the first idea that I kind of did like, and does evolve as you see as we go along in the process. Anyway, again, I just want to say thank you all. This month, September, we made it to the $500 milestone, which is amazing. After all this hard work, and we've superseded it. And without you pledging to me, I'm not able to make these DVDs, and it makes it obviously a lot more rewarding, and my fans are actually subscribing to this, and and it's all about you as well. So I'm able to kind of do what you want, because you're interacting with the Patreon and letting me know what you want to see and what you want from the actual prints I send out, or through the videos I do, or the topics I make. So as you can see here, I've kept the face, but I've started to change the anatomy of the hand, and the body and the torso and that. And it's, as you can see, I'm not using any reference still. I don't use any human reference at all when painting this. It's really important to remember that when you're doing fantasy art, or you're doing anything that's exaggerated, even like orcs or elves or goblins, whatever you're doing, I mean, yeah, they've got a human element, but they're still quite exaggerated, And here I played around with his legs and the whole design of this goblin. trying to make it look as aggressive as possible. And I really wasn't happy with the drawing still at this stage. It was kind of really rough, and I had to play around with the legs, and I think I ended up editing this a lot. I first started off with a mace, but then I switched it to a sword because the mace didn't make sense. And usually when I get an idea, I was reasonably happy with this idea, even though it changed a lot, I start to rough in colour, rough in the whole, what it might look like if it's in colour or grayscale. And I haven't even determined the lighting yet. I was pretty happy with the end result in this. It wasn't, I don't think it was groundbreaking illustration or anything. Oh, excuse me. It's been a long week. Just come back from Sydney Oz Comic Con, so I'm just trying to record this after a long weekend. So I apologise if I'm yawning. I'll try not to yawn. But anyway, I when I first go to colour, I play around with texture and details and stuff like that, and I just sample it, and as you can see, I just switched off the colour layer, and I've gone to fixing up the anatomy of the design. And you see, I've got, even in the files that I give you all, I have a whole bunch of samples of other people's illustrations, and it's not because I was copying them or trying to cheat anyway. I was just looking at what do the goblins of Magic the Gathering look like, and it's not because I don't have an idea of what I want goblins to look like, but I simply do want goblins to fit that style of Magic the Gathering, and I'm designing my own goblin, but within the style of Magic, my own way. It's still going to be painted like me, how I would paint a goblin. And a lot of people are already really familiar with Magic, so for me, painting that style will help my art to be more, I suppose, respected or liked or followed. And it's not just that. It's the art that I like. It's the style that I like. I do love Magic the Gathering art, and I'm I can't copy every other art. You can't copy someone's art style completely. You're always going to have your touch to it, and it's going to be similar, but you're going to be able to tell from artist to artist what's different or the same about it. So really, at this stage, the idea is there. I wanted this goblin to be running out at the enemy, charging at people, and with a sword. And to do that, I really need to rework the design and the sketch. It's about redrawing your drawing, I suppose. That's the power of Photoshop, is you can actually redraw and just go in and add more dimensions and clean up your drawing. And the good thing about having a good drawing is if your drawing is done really well, especially with illustration, fantasy illustration and stuff, if your drawing's spot on, it's going to be easier to paint because your whole information's worked out. So here I'm just laying in grayscale value. I haven't gone to color, just gone to grayscale, and I just do it just to work out the lighting, or just work out what works and what doesn't work out. Lots of fun. And so I just start painting with grayscale. I decided to go for a landscape orientation. I put it in a kind of like a mountain scene. And the goblins in Luminous Ages, they're very different to the goblins in Magic in terms of what they're like. They're not the bad guys. they actually are good. They try to protect the mountains from being drained of magic, so to speak, or drained of dream energy. And so at the end I put a signature, like a dream energy signature on the ground or on the rocks, that symbolizes the magic energy that they're protecting and stopping from being destroyed. And so I just rough in an environment, like it's not even a finished piece of environment, it's just really rough rocks and mountains and caves, and it's just different shapes. I'm playing around with different shapes and ideas, and the reason why I do it in grayscale is because I just want to get the idea down and just it's good to kind of have your character sitting in a believable environment, because it makes it, I suppose, more realistic or lifelike. And obviously, as you all know, I kind of started out doing environments for film and games years ago, and about 5 years ago, that's where I started, wasn't actually characters. And I think that's always going to be a touch with my work, is I am going to always consider environment. Sometimes I won't, and I'll focus on characters. Honestly, I've never done just a portrait illustration, but I plan to do some portraits of the Wicked Witch eventually. I want to do the Wicked Witch because I think she's cool. But yeah, so it's just, I find if you've got an environment, you can also determine the lighting on the character, and if you make the environment lighting and the character lighting believable, consistent, it's going to make it all fit in perfectly. Everything will make more sense and be more believable and immersible, and you'll be able to work with it more. Yeah, I'm still cleaning up the drawing, fixing up the leg, and like I said, I just wanted to fix it up so that it looks like he's actually on the ground standing, because he wasn't looking like he was standing on the ground or lunging forward. Before, he didn't look like that, but now he is. And so, I've gone in here and just cleaned up everything, and as you can see also, from the bottom of the neck to the bottom, basically I've drawn a line, and that line shows that from the bottom of the neck of a character to the bottom, to the ground, that's where the foot needs to be. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So if you have a line from the bottom of the neck joint, that's your central plane, your central point on the human body, or whatever body it is. And so you keep on drawing that line down straight. That's where the foot should sit. That's where the front foot or the balance should be on your character. So, as you can see, fixing this up, the drawing, still cleaning this drawing up, even though I painted all that rough grayscale, cleaning that up makes a massive difference. I wanted a shoulder piece, shoulder arm, I wanted him to have hair. But this drawing was now coming to life, because I was getting everything right. And this is why, you should spend hours drawing your design first. I mean, this was actually 2 hours of drawing, or 3 hours of drawing, and get it right. And a lot of people don't understand how important that is. It's just you can go straight to paint, and I've done that before. You've seen, some of you have probably seen my other videos where I've gone straight to painting something, and I think that does work if you're really confident, or you've got a really clear picture of what you want in your head. It can work, or you just feel like painting. You don't feel like drawing. Sometimes drawing it allows you to explore the idea or the design more first. It allows you to go in and you draw that digitally in a layer. You keep on drawing until you get it right, until you get the anatomy or the structure or the posture right, and then you can worry about the lighting, the color, and everything else, and the values. But you can see I'm cleaning up this drawing. I'm adding a cape, I added hair, I added rings, earrings are added. I fix up the sword, I fix up the hands, the legs, and this final drawing is so different to the first drawing that I did. It's just a massive change, and I mean, you might say, oh, it's subtle, but the reality is it is massive. You know, a whole bunch of subtle changes to a character is like a massive change. You know, and the other thing, when you're designing characters, or even you have human characters, and you get you just move the eye left or right the wrong way or something, or you make the cheekbone slightly higher on the human, or whatever it is, forehead slightly bigger, that changes what that person, that character, or that painting looks like. So it's the same thing with this. It's like, I mean, I know it's a characterized goblin, but it's going to change. It's not going to be perfect straight away. You have to really play around with it and get it right. The sketch, So I think the point I'm trying to make is that drawing is really important when you are working from imagination a lot. Like I could have gotten a friend to pose like this, right, and shot it at a really cool angle with a good camera lens, and it would look really, really good. It would look really, really awesome. But I don't think you'd get as much exaggeration as I have in this painting right now. The difference is, you can see, he's leaning to one side. He's got this huge head. The leg is the leg that is furthest away from us is really far back. And it really does look like he's leaning forward. He's got this distorted perspective look about him, and so you're not going to get that very well easily with photography. You lose your imagination in a way with photography, and I'm not saying it's bad. That's good, in some cases, but that's the difference between creating something from imagination versus copying a photo or using a photo for reference. I mean, you'll see, you can find reference everywhere. You can get reference everywhere for these sort of things, like the cape, the armor, human muscles or goblin muscles. You can get all the reference anywhere. But you start off with your drawing, you get it right. You can fix it up based on the reference that you find. If you're really unsure about something, you just go get the reference of, say, a shoulder plate or armor or face or whatever. Anyway, so I think at this point I decided to go color, and I stick to the color. Now I have a funny feeling this goblin painting, I mean, it ends up being, the goblin is quite, well, it's reasonably green, and it's interesting because color has a big impact on people's purchases. I mean, for some reason I think people don't like the color green. I don't know what color they really like, but say if it's blue, if I painted a blue goblin versus a green goblin, I'm pretty sure maybe the blue goblin will sell more, or a red one might sell more. But definitely there are color preferences that people have, and even like story or character preferences. People may want you to paint a character that's pretty. They may not want a scary character, and that may be what sells more, or is more popular across, your fans or your marketplace, or wherever you're creating art. But anyway, so I'm continuing on with coloring and just adding in shadows and stuff. It's just mainly local color. So for those of you that don't know local color is the color of something when when there's no directional light or no bounce light going on it. It's just the color of an actual object, the tint of an actual object. That, you know, say you have something in a very low light situation that doesn't have any ambient light or any bounce light or any directional light coming from a spotlight. You know, you have a book and it's made of red, and that's its local color. You know, that's what we mean by local color. That's what the product is made as. You know, his goblin skin, he's really got green skin, but, you know, he has warm tones. He has yellows on his highlights, and, you know, on the edge light and on his highlights, and he has blues on his shadows. You know, so put simply, it's just like, you know, its color has a big impact on how popular your artwork is going to be. You know, and that depends on where you want to take it. Whether you want to sell it at cons or whether you want to offer it to clients. But even so, I'd say, like, you know, certain colors will go well for clients, for their jobs. It depends on their audience. So the way I colored this is very different to how I've done a lot of stuff. Is I started out black, filling in, not black, but filling in the goblin with about 80% grey, 70% I think it is. And I started painting in the light. I started painting where the light is. You know, before I had that layer up with the local colour, because we covered that, and that, you know, it didn't look cool, the local colour. So then I went into grayscale and started painting in black and white. Because I think, like, what I was trying to figure out was where are the shadows, where's the lighting hitting. And in this case, the lighting is coming from the top right. You know, and this is actually the composition, roughly the composition we complete. We finish this composition. We actually make this composition a final painting. So we put this through, rendering all the shadows, color it all in, so to speak, get the lighting right. And that's it, I suppose.
So once I've got the drawing nailed, pretty much, I decide to start to paint in grayscale value the shadows, the lights, and work out where the light is hitting the goblin. So apologies for my very funny sounding voice. I think I've got some hay fever, so apologies for that. Yeah, so as I continue on, I put in all the shadows, all the lights, figure out where is my directional light, and at the moment the lighting is coming in from the top right on the goblin, and it's just very rough. It's not meant to be a finished lighting scenario. It's just a very rough working out of where the lighting is at the moment. I also use this time to kind of work out the background a bit more, start to play around with the design of the background, because you need to kind of get the values right in the background as well, and that takes time and I suppose preparation and stuff. And I'm just kind of painting in a bridge or a ledge there that he's running from, you know, it ends up being a bridge behind him. So he's come out of one of the caves or one of the holes, and so it really, you know, like I said, with doing the environment as well, it helps you tell a story better. So if you know the habitat that he's in, the goblin's in, and you've got an idea of where he's at, you can then, you know, you can tell a better story, or you can figure out what colours you're going to use. So while I work out the character, I soften off the background. I just have the background sitting there in a lighter color, and I fix up, all the details in the background, just to give me a general sense of the whole design of the picture and the layout, so the layout looks more interesting. And eventually we go, once the design is figured out, the background and the contrast and harmony is working, because it's really important to get your values right first in a painting. Sometimes I go, like you've seen me in the past, if you watch my past videos, I go straight to color, and that does work in many situations. But sometimes if you're designing something completely from imagination, you still want to figure things out, it's really a good idea to paint in grayscale, and like I am doing now, simply because you need your 3 tones. You've got your 3 shades of grey. You've got your darks, your greys, and your lights, and light greys, and placing them in the specific areas will draw attention to your character. And I can go over the theory of painting your grayscales correctly and getting all that right, but the reality is you probably need to go and look at things like other illustrations, look at photography, look at life, and try and learn how values work. Usually as values recede in the distance, the darks disappear. So like if you go and take a photo, go and look out at a mountain landscape, the mountain's really far in the distance, there's not going to be much shadow there. Because it's so far away, the atmospheric perspective drops them back. So the darks start to disappear, and it's a little more greys and whites in the background. But we can talk about that further in further lectures. So what I'm doing here is I've made a selection around the goblin, and I'm just painting more lighting. I've actually flattened the pencil and the color. So I had the pencil in a multiply layer and had the grayscale in a layer underneath, in a normal layer, and then I merged the multiply layer of the pencil with the actual grayscale values, merged it together, and I started painting it all as one layer. But what I do is I make sure I keep that selection. You can hide the selection by pressing Ctrl H, but it's really important to do that, because if you paint outside by accident, you might have to clean up that illustration. So just putting more stuff into the background again. So just trying to, it does change over the whole piece, but the idea is to also make all the roads, all the rocks point towards the goblin or lead into the goblin, because you want the viewer's eye to be led to the goblin. And a lot of people forget that when they're doing environments. A lot of people just do characters for a reason. It's because they don't know how to do environments. And that's the reality of it. I've talked to a lot of other artists and at conventions, and they're like, oh, how do you do environments? I don't know how to do characters. And that's kind of really, really bad in a way, because if you can't put your character into a scene or an atmosphere or a world, it really doesn't sell the story. It doesn't really sell what it does, or doesn't tell a story. And so it's really important to remember that environment, it may not be the focal point, but it's just as important as the character. It helps the character, and the design can lead into and make a focal point on the character. So here I'm just they've got my signature there for some reason, so I'll move it around a bit. But I'm just painting in the character more and more. I'm refining the shapes, getting everything correct. You don't want to be getting things wrong at this stage. You really want to be cleaning up the character as much as possible, painting as much as possible all the information on the character. Once I got the character roughly figured out what I want to do, what I do is I then do a color balance layer and a hue saturation layer, I believe it is. Yes, so I start off with a hue saturation layer. So I saturate the whole image so it's blue, and then I do color balance on the actual goblin, And then I gave him blue tones. I started off very blue, and then I create a color layer, and then I apply color. In the color layer, I select the goblin, and I start colorizing the goblin. Okay, but that's not. I don't do that until I've done a hue, saturation, and color balance on the whole image. And I make sure the goblin's still selected in a separate layer, and then I apply color to the goblin. Simple as that. And you know, these are just, like I said, these colors before are just the base. It's just the start of the color values that are on the actual goblin himself. It is quite light. I end up darkening it all up and changing it all up, but it's just the first wash of color. And like I said, it's the local color before. So those, I would actually, if you don't know what local color is, I would actually research that as your homework project. But again, local color is, say you're in a room and you don't have any light coming in from outside. It's just daytime, and you've got a red book in front of you. You know that book is red. That's the local color of the book. But as soon as you walk outside and it's really bright and sunny and there's yellow light, it starts to turn orange, right? Because that's the ambient light. That's the bounce light from the sun. Or if you have a spotlight inside and it's a tungsten light, then it becomes even more red or orange. So that's what I mean by local color. And this is why it's really important to make sure you understand that concept. And that's where a lot of people don't understand. Like, they look at my work and they go, "Oh wow, your color's really amazing. Like, how do you make it so lifelike?" The reality is, a lot of artists, a lot of people when they're first starting out, I won't say artists because it's just people in general, it's what we do. We start painting in color, and we just, like, this color right now is all local color, and that's it. We just think you just put a bit of color in the painting, that's it. No, well, there's more to color. The color works. It's not just local color in pictures or in life. There's things like directional light. There's things like bounce light. There's ambient light, and all these things need to be accounted for. I start just filling in a little bit of bounce light on this. The yellow edging is, I suppose, what you call bounce light or rim light. But that's the whole. At the moment, this is just a local color, so I'm just putting in, greens and reds and yellows, and it's just getting the base down, getting the basic color palette down. That's really what I'm doing. And I'm making his hair really wild and crazy, because crazy wild is cool. Crazy wild is cool. Yeah, so you just got to make sure that when you're creating when you're coloring in things, you don't just finish off, okay, it's a green goblin, it's going to go green. Or it's a red dragon, I just used red. You got to think about, okay, in the shadows of a red dragon, if it's a blue sky, if the blue light is hitting the ground and it's bouncing back up, if it's near a lake and the light's hitting the lake and it's bouncing back up off the dragon, that's going to be blue shadows overlaid on top of the red. So you'd have like purples and blues in the shadows of the dragon. You wouldn't be putting strong purples and blues in there, but you would definitely be glazing in, whether you're using acrylic paint or digital paint, you'd be painting in a soft layer some blues. Wow, so I'm really sorry about my voice. I sound like Barry White at the moment. It's dropped like an octave, simply because I got some hay fever. So it's spring here in Australia, for those of you that aren't in Australia, and yeah, so for some reason, as soon as that happens, I get like blocked nose and a really itchy throat. and I don't like to take medications because they make me drowsy and stuff, and who likes drugs? Seriously, I mean, I don't like taking medications, so that's just me. So here I've added more texture into the rocks and just painting more stuff around him, cleaning up. I start cleaning up the actual character as well. There's a lot of edges that need tidying up. I use the eraser tool, a hard eraser or a soft eraser, whatever I can get, and just clean it all up. And as you see, like now I've got the local color figured out, I just start painting in values that I want more. I use those local colors. Like there's so much you can do to make it look lifelike. You can put soft light layers, overlay layers. You can put, and what I mean by that is you can put your shadows, your highlights, your extra colors that might be bouncing around in the scene. I chose a red color, so like because the rocks end up becoming really, really red. So there'd be bounce like the red, like the light. There'd be sunlight coming from the top, the yellow hitting his forehead, as you can see. There'd be this really bright spot on his shiny spot on his nose and his forehead. And then secondly, so you have your yellow light, rim light, and then you have red bounce light from the rocks. So the rocks, because the yellow light's hitting the rocks really hard, yellow mixes with red to create orange, and then you'd have orange and orangey red bounce light on the other side, and that's what I just put on his nose. So I'm adding like skin textures here, all that sort of cool stuff. And really, it's just detailing now. It's really, the whole design's done. This is why you get the drawing right at the start. The whole design's done. You just need to clean up. Like at this stage, when you're creating a painting, once you got your drawing and your local color sorted, you just have to add to the design. You just texture everything, you paint everything in, you get your materials right. You have to make the metal look like metal, you have to make the leather look like leather, the skin look like skin, glossy skin, the cape look like a cape. And here I am actually putting in actual shadows. So here I finally start to add shadows. I use a soft light brush and paint in dark shadows, because without shadows it's not going to pop. So here I create a shadow, because his shadow is kind of falling behind him. And all I do is I duplicate the layer of the goblin, fill it in with black, and then use the distort and perspective tool to make it look like it's falling behind him, and just play around with it until I get it right. So the shadow's going behind him. So just cleaning up that shadow, getting that shadow right. I usually put the shadow in an overlay layer or a soft light layer, or even if it's all still in its own layer, I make sure to drop off the opacity of it so that it's maybe only 80% black, so that way you can still see a bit of the rocks on the ground or whatever. And I go back to painting the goblin. Like right now, it's just about getting all the details right and all the information right. It's at this point, you should kind of be looking up skin textures, looking up the cape, looking up leather, how leather works, and there are a whole bunch of references that I provided. I have also provided references of other artists' work, how they've created goblins and stuff. Not for you to go copy them or do anything with the work. It's just so that you can have a look and see how other people have approached goblins, and I like to do that. Not because I'm copying anyone. I don't like to directly copy anyone's work. I never do that. But I just like to look at how people approach things and use it as inspiration, or go like, it helps me to solve problems of my own, like how do people tackle goblin ears, or how do people tackle a goblin's nose, or anatomy of the goblin, how do you tackle that? It's just it's an interesting one. So also what I do is, once I've got a lot more detailed shadows worked in on that goblin, I then do another color balance on that goblin itself, on the character himself, and so I push things towards blues, reds, whatever color I feel like. So in color balance, you have your shadows, midtones, and your highlights, and you can pick with that. You can basically pick what colors you want in your shadows, what colors you want in your midtones, and what you want in your highlights. And I went for yellow in the highlights, midtones were reds and oranges, and in the shadows was blue and greens. I think I did put a bit of red in there too, and that also changes your color palette. It balances out a little bit. That's why it's called a color balance, but it also gives you more color to play with. A bigger color range in your actual design. So I'm just cleaning up the edges here, like making sure that, you know, I erase any excess stuff that's kind of hanging over. It's really important to clean up all your edges before you start, you know, detailing everything in a painting. So many times I've done work and the edges haven't been refined. I mean, they call it edge control in you know, in the art world. You know, someone that has mastery over the edges can really determine whether it can really make the difference in a painting. You know, it can really shows if you know you've got sharp edges or you've got soft edges. It doesn't matter. Nothing's right or wrong, but if you have control over what is a soft edge and what is a hard and crisp edge, or that will determine whether your painting is very believable or it's a great job that you've done on the painting, you know. So yeah, really important. And here it's just a matter of adding, you know, more shadows, going in, you know, in the multiply layer. I found the whole image was just extremely bright, so I went and got a black color and created a multiply layer and just started painting in shadows over the whole scene. This is where you start to, you know, work out your shadows and your lighting, and you create more depth in the image. This is how you get away from the local color thing. You need to create a shadow layer when you're creating characters, a light layer, and a bounce light layer. You know, you need to create all your different lighting layers to bring your rendering to life. You know, it's simple as that. You don't have. I mean, some people just use one layer to paint the whole picture, and that's great. You know, that's brilliant. You know, and those people are, you know, extremely advanced professionals, and I have done that myself too. And I'm not saying I'm totally advanced, extremely advanced. It's not about that. But even me, even as a confident professional that's been doing it for years, you know, I still like to, I suppose, separate things out in layers, because, you know, I might paint a dark shadow layer in a multiply layer, and it might be in blacks, and I may not be happy with it. I may turn around and say, oh, well, it actually isn't really what I was looking for. You know what I mean? Like, it might be that, oh no, I should have used blues in the multiply layer in creating that overlay layer or whatever it is. The moment I'm painting in an overlay layer, painting in all the shadows, you know. And so, yeah, eventually I'll flatten it down, actually flatten it down to one layer, but there's nothing wrong with using many layers to get your lighting right on your character. And a lot of people do, you know, think, oh no, you've got to do it all in one layer. No, you don't. Actually advise, even if you at any level, don't do that. You know, what if you need to change something? Even when you're working with clients, what if they change something on you? You know, what if they say, hey, look, we like the shadows, but can you make your shadows blue, more blue? And so, like, if you've got that layer there, you can just go change the color. Like, if you've got the shadow layer in a different layer, you can then do a hue saturation adjustment and change it to blue shadows versus black or whatever other color you've got there. So and you know, right now it's just cleaning up as much of the information. Like I've gotten rid of pretty much all the line work and painted over as much shadows and stuff. And even at this point, I wasn't really happy with the picture. It was all right, you know. I'm like sitting there thinking, oh yeah, it's okay. And I'm just deep down thinking, nah, I'm not comfortable with it, you know. And that's the thing with art. A lot of people, they give up straight away. They're like, oh, you know, oh, it's too hard, or it's not working, or they think, oh, this is done like, you know, their tolerance level is at a certain level. You really need to push your tolerance levels past the threshold if you want to be an artist. You need to say to yourself, hey, I'm just going to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until something looks really, really good. And if you really want to go really far with art, you push, then you take a break, show it to a friend or a colleague, and then have a break, and then go back to it the next day or the next week and go, hey, how can I make it even better? Sometimes in the industry you don't have that liberty, you don't have the time, you only have a week to do one painting. But usually that's why you work with an art director who might be, or you might have a month. It depends who you're working for. I know, like, if you work for Magic the Gathering, if you're doing one commission, you might have 2 or 3 commissions going at a time in a month. But you're working with a director to push out 3 paintings in a month. But they're giving you feedback over that whole month on them and to improve them and make them better. And that's usually how it works when you're working with clients. But yeah, as you can see, I'm just applying detail to the face. Here is where we just start to really push the detail, and like honestly, I look at heaps of goblins. I look at what other people have done in the past. You know, it's not and I'm not copying their goblin, it's just my design, but I'm looking at how do they do the shadows, how do they do the eyes on other goblins, how do they do the teeth, how do they do the gums. You can look at humans and stuff, but I think humans are boring. I'd rather look at a goblin, a painting of a goblin. But you can look at the anatomy of humans, and that can guide you as to how, you know, how to paint your shadows under your eyes, how to paint your nose, how to paint your tongue, how to paint your teeth. But, you know, humans don't have sharp teeth like this, and we don't have big gums, gaping gums like this when we open our mouth, you know. Some people do, some people don't. So it's really important to kind of remember that, you know. So yeah, it's just, you know, here is when you zoom in, like this is the part where you've worked everything out, the local colors, you started to put in shadows and stuff, and then now it's just a matter of detailing everything, detailing it as much as possible. Yeah, so it's just, you know, adding details, adding, you know, the things into the ears, into the skin, painting the skin texture correctly, you know, using textured brushes to bring up detail, painting in the leather, painting in the metal, everything. And this is the really, like, there's nothing much more I can say, because it's not that it's the boring part. It's, I mean, for me, I actually enjoy rendering things up. Like, if I know what I'm rendering up, if I know my materials and I've got good references around me, I really enjoy this part. Like, you know, I mean, I enjoy all part of the painting process, but a lot of artists don't. I think this is why I mean, I love doing concept art, but this is why I'm more of an illustrator. Like, I find myself, I love doing comics, and I love doing book covers, and I love doing card art, and I want to do more stuff. I would love to do stuff for Magic the Gatherings, because I like pouring hours and hours into detailing artwork, and that's the part that I like. So here I'm doing another hue and saturation adjustment on the Goblin, because I wasn't happy with the lighting scenario. I wanted to add, I've obviously got his armor there, but I wanted to add more oranges and yellows, because the whole scene was looking very dull and boring. Like, he's meant to be in a cave, and there's warm mountains, and it's meant to be a bright and sunny day, and we change it to that. We change it to a really bright sunny day, or a warm environment. It's a hot, rugged mountains, almost like the Grand Canyon. And it's really, really important to, I suppose, play around with that. And I've changed his tones to blue, actually, but they go back to green. But the reason why I do that is because I just wasn't happy with the way it was going. I had to fix it all up and change it all. But I'm happy, it gets there eventually. By God, it gets there. So I'm just putting in some clouds, and I changed the whole scene to red, and there you can see there I've got an actual reference of a magic card, another Goblin card, using it kind of as inspiration. Looking at that color palette and going, hey, look, I want to do something more interesting like that. And so, I'm not stealing anything. All I'm doing is I'm looking at the color palette of what other people have used. And it's the same, like if you were to paint from a photo, you would use the color palette of the photo. And this is where, I start playing around with the design and make sure that it looks like a bridge in the background, and I go for ready earthy tones, and just to give it more atmosphere, I suppose, give it more color, depth, because before it was looking really dull, and it really gets, I suppose, better and better and better from this point on. And this is why, a lot of people think, like, the Goblin at this point doesn't really look that great. But a lot of people think, it's really quick to get a painting done. It's not, because there's a lot of layers and there's a lot of changes and decisions that you make when you're making a painting. Like, even though you might have a pencil nutted out, or you have a really good design nutted out, sometimes you just want to change things because you're just not happy with it, or you think you figured out something that's better. And I'm not. I can be indecisive, and I think that's what makes me a better artist, is because I kind of am a bit of a perfectionist. I'm trying to look for something perfect all the time. But it's that never settling kind of thing. So it's that never kind of settling, it's that never kind of not being happy until you're really happy. I'm not saying, be miserable with your artwork. I'm just saying, just kind of looking at it from a different point of view and going, okay, yeah, even if you think something's amazing, look, take a break and go, okay, yeah, it looks good, but how can we make it even better? So now I'm just adding in, color dodge layer and adding more lighting and, painting in the like edge lighting and stuff. So in color dodge, we also have overlay lighting layers. Both of those lighting layers allow me to kind of add edge lighting or the yellow tints to the skin, and add to basically add warmth to the character. Because we've gone through a very warm scene. We've gone to some very warm mountains. So yeah, that's the whole idea. And I'm not really talking much about this, about how I'm detailing it, because it's the kind of thing where you've got to get in and do it yourself, and look at things All I can do is kind of offer advice, and you know, obviously you watch this video and see how I'm doing it. But you know, I add a cast shadow as well, because he's leaning over and his face is also over his body. I have a cast shadow layer. So, you know, like I said, you've got your with lighting, you have your directional light, you have ambient light, you have bounce light, you have edge or rim light, and you also have cast shadows. And so all these things are really important to consider and factor in when you're actually creating art, or you're creating characters. And that's what makes it more believable. So we've got that cast shadow underneath his arm. We have a cast shadow that comes underneath his neck as well. The shadow's been cast over his leather vest. And so it's really important to kind of think about that. And here I'm just got another version of art that I played around with, and it's just like, yeah, how can I make it better? So I just ended up, you know, cleaning up things and adding more lighting and stuff like that. Actually, this is where I added the cast shadow. So there's a shadow that, you know, that shadow that under his chin, that's falling down over his actual vest. It's really important to do that. So at this stage, it's just a matter of cleaning up and refining the illustration, just adding more details in shadows to the actual goblin. And you know, it takes a while to get a character looking right and bringing it to life. Especially with a goblin, you have the situation where it's a fictitious character that you can't. I mean, you can get someone to dress up in a goblin suit, but still, the anatomy of this goblin is exaggerated anatomy, and it's not a real human. I mean, you can base them on human muscles, but still you have stretched, longer arms, you have long legs, you have 2 claws for toes, and so there's these things that you've got to consider when you're doing a whole bunch of character designs. So yeah, I'm just continually adding more shadows here, you know, the cast shadows, cleaning up as much as I can, and you know, it's starting to come to life, a bit more to life. The environment's looking good as well. I mean, it does need a bit more work and polish, but yeah, I'm just really, at this stage, it's just adding color variation as well. You know, it's not just having reds in the cape, but you know, different types of reds and shadows, and you really need to look at the materials of things. You know, I was looking at the materials of capes and stuff, you know, as I was painting, and I've gone back into the environment like I said before, and just added in more detail, added in a whole bunch of texture. I'm using a textured brush and just painting and painting and painting a lot of stuff. And I just use a hard brush, but I add a textured effect to it. There's a rock texture into the brush, the hard brush, and that's all downloaded. That's all in the brush pack that I send out. In fact, I mean, I update my brush pack every so often, so you get new brushes every month, but sometimes the brushes stay the same. But we'll just keep on sending that out, and you see my brush list will improve and change as I grow, as I create more work for Luminous Ages, because we're going to be creating custom brushes more for the comic and for all the illustrations. So I also looked at clouds. I'm looking at like references of clouds, so that way when I painted in the clouds, you can see there's a photo on the left there when I started back into the environment. You know, like I was really happy with the goblin, how it started to show, but you know, I like to jump from one thing to another, not because, you know, I have ADD or anything like that, but because when you're painting a painting, you need to get everything looking right at the same time. You know, you need to build up everything. If you've got the character up to a really good level, you need to then go back to the environment. The environment's got too much information and too much detail. You need to go back to the character and make the character pop out. But in saying so, with this painting, it was really important to make sure the character was the focal point. Although the environment is quite warm and red, and it's got a lot of attention in colour, I still had to make sure that the goblin stood out versus the environment. And so I pulled up that painting that I like from Magic the Gathering, and I'm just like looking at that as a reference point. and getting an idea of what colors they're using in their mountains and stuff, and it is exaggerated colors. Like if you go and look at an actual mountain, I mean, you can go to the Grand Canyon, you'll see similar colors at the Grand Canyon, but most mountains and rocks and cliff faces, you know, there are these cliffs in South Australia called the Flinders Ranges. You're not going to get them that red, even though they are very earthy colors. So, you know, that's the other thing with fantasy landscapes. A lot of people don't realize is that, yeah, you're still painting from life, you still paint the subject matter, but it's always exaggerated colors. You know, it's a fantasy world, it's for video games, it's for card games, it's for movies. It's never going to be exactly 100% based on reality. You know, your values might be right, you have to base your values on reality. You know, your grayscale values and your lighting has to be right based on reality, but your color scheme can be really exaggerated. You have that liberty with fantasy, and this is what I'm doing with the mountains. So just making sure that happens. So yeah, just I kept on adding in that path, the pylon and stuff to make it pop out. And the environment really is starting to come together now as well. You know, having that textured brush, I didn't use any photos in this painting at all. Even with all I used was textured brushes. And look, you know, you can use photos as long as you blend that into the scene. I mean, I've seen Magic the Gathering artists that use photos in the backdrops and they blend it in and paint on top of the photos, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, this one I just wanted to paint. I just couldn't. I think because I couldn't fathom in my mind how I would put a photo to this because it was so exaggerated. It was so kind of creative in a way. You know, the rocks were all weird shapes and jaggedy shapes, and you know, it was just easy for me to paint them all rather than go and look for references to fit rock textures in. But in saying so, in hindsight, you know, I could have just grabbed a photo texture of a rock and just whacked it on the ground and lightly, you know, blended that in. But at the same time, I just didn't want to do that, you know. So this goblin is for portfolio. It is for, you know, Magic the Gathering portfolio. It's also for Luminous Ages. There are goblins, like I said, in the comic. So I'm thinking of both things. I've got both things in mind when I'm making this. I'm thinking, you know, it's going to be painted in the style of Magic, but it's also my own design for my comic. And you never know, maybe because it's different, Magic the Gathering, the people at Wizards of the Coast might like it, or they may not, you know, and that's part of the battle. So yeah, I'm just adding more detail. You can see there's detail all over. We're going back to the character now. The environment's at a point that I'm really happy with. I do add more to it later on, but at this stage, you know, I select the character and I just start grabbing a different brush and just start adding in more detail to the scene, shadows, refinement. You know, this is the part where you just keep on detailing and detailing until it starts to come to life. And it's not about, you know, adding mindless detail. We just keep on, you know, playing around with the brush or pushing pixels around. It's like starting to figure out, okay, I want to highlight here. So I started adding in. I created a highlight layer. Like I added orange rim light. That's the light that's coming from the ground. A bounce light, should I say? So on the left of the character, where the hand is that we were just painting, there's orange bounce light. And on the right, top right, you got sunlight coming and hitting the forehead of the character, directly hitting him in the face. Then you have that happening, and yeah, so it's just a matter of, you know, these are the things that you got to consider. You know, like, this is why it's important to have an environment. A lot of people just paint characters without an environment. You know, your environment it actually dictates the lighting of the character. So the actual bounce light around the character is orange. As you can see, I'm putting in orange edge lighting. The lighting coming in from above is yellow sunlight. You know, and you can see the rim light is all around the edge of the actual goblin's cheek. And I've got another version of the painting on the right. It's an old version, and it's something. What I did is, because I wasn't happy, I kind of just I edited the painting. I saved out another version, and I just kind of played around with the goblin and I made my own notes, visual notes, like I did my own paint over on it.
and I just kind of played around with it and got it right. Well, and then I used that as reference, and then I went in and did the final thing, the final adjustment. So as you can see, we're adding really nice edge light, the orange. I don't know why I said blue. That's because we're bringing up an old file, and I bring up the old file there just then because I wanted to just go through and just show you that the old file, it has come a long way. It's good to actually, when you're working on a painting, it's good to have to save out the old versions, because when you look at it, you go, oh wow, it's come a long way. You can actually look back on the past painting and go, yeah, okay, well, it's getting better, and it kind of motivates you to keep on going, like, oh, how can we push it even further? And so, yeah, it's just really refining the details, getting everything right. I've added in more, like I said, paint in the selection, always paint in the selection. So to make a selection, you just hit Control and click on the layer that you want to select. I'm in layer 28 right now, and so you basically click and hit Control on that layer, and it creates those pixels around. That means you're selected in that layer. You press Control H, you can hide the ants, but you're still selected, you're still painting in that selection. The reason why I do that with characters, or with anything really, is that way you don't have any problems. You don't lose any, you don't paint out of that area. So I'm just painting this edge, the edges of the cast shadow. I'm making the cast shadow pop more. And one thing I do to add detail into areas is if I have a texture brush, like I do this later with the tongue, and I think I'm doing it now with something, I think with a sword, is you create a brush, like a texture brush, of some type, whatever texture fits the surface you're working on. You put that textured brush in overlay layer, you hit a darker color, and then you paint on top. And what it does, you don't lose the colors below, you actually just add texture on top, and it makes things look lifelike. It pops it out, it gives it like a sheen or a surface. And you need to play around with it. Like, you can try your brush mode in overlay or soft light mode or hard light mode, and what will happen is it'll give your subject matter a different material, so you can make it look more like leather or whatever. But you need to experiment and play around with it, because there's no hard or fast rule. Like, it depends on the topic you're painting and your lighting scenario, the time of day, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, so we're getting there. I think we've got about 40 minutes left of the process video. This is all sped up, and I think, most people are pretty happy with the speed of the videos, but keep in mind, this is sped up considerably. Probably this was about 20 hours of painting, and I really wouldn't want to bore you all with that, because part of painting, I work differently. As I'm painting something, it's not that I don't know what I want, but I do change my mind, or I kind of enjoy the creative process of painting, and I like to take time to make sure things are done well. So, I might have a day on something, then I'll take a break, and then have another day on something and take a break, and I might paint for 6 hours, 7 hours at a time. And we go like that. So, I record nearly every part of the process of the painting, but we speed it up. And if people, if you're not happy with that, or you want, the videos to run longer, just let us know. But I think this is a good pace. I think that's a pretty well done pace. So here I'm just adding more, I suppose, saturation to the nose. So pulling out references of leather and stuff. And it's good to actually look at, like I've got here some photos of leather, and they're available in the reference pack, but I'm actually looking at the color palette that is in leather, and really painting that in. I'm looking at leather and I'm going, okay, well, it's got these you can have these really saturated oranges and browns and earthy tones, and that's what I'm doing. And I'm also looking at a goblin painting. I'm looking at a goblin painting, looking at the skin, how glossy the skin is on this goblin. I'm thinking, well, I should be doing something like making his skin look glossy and oily and, giving him that kind of sheen, and he ends up having that at the end. And, and like I said, I'm not copying this goblin. The goblins that I've got in the picture, the illustration, is a totally different goblin. He's a red skin goblin. Mine's a greeny blue skin goblin. And just going back to the face, adding more details, adding the shadows, adding the chin, fixing up the chin, the eyes. The eyes are a big problem. They just look like, they look like they've just been painted with the local color. They need more depth. So you can see here I've added more detail to the face, a highlight to the nose to make the nose pop, shadows around the eyes, around the ears, that sort of stuff. And also to give it life, just some scars around the nose, markings around the nose. Nose looks a bit, it needs to look, like he's weathered and torn and he's old. I wouldn't say old, but just a bit more textured, because he's a goblin. He's not a supermodel. He's an ugly goblin, scary looking goblin. And so it's about adding the textures into the surfaces of the skin and the rings, the earrings as well. Really important, give them that metallic sheen. We add more metal surfaces to the actual shoulder pad as well, make it look more metallic materials. And here I'm just cleaning up the edges, cleaning up, making that face pop out, giving it edge light, rim light. The bounce light is orange, the edge rim light is yellow. It's really pushing it as far as I can. And you see me from time to time going to grayscale mode. The reason why I do that is because I find that if I can see whether the focal point is working. So in grayscale mode, when you flick it to black and white, you can see, hey, is the focus on the goblin? So here I've actually got references of that shoulder plate armor, and I'm actually I'm looking at the colors and the values that are used in that shoulder plate. And I'm painting in the spikes, the highlights, the way that metal actually works. And so if you look at that shoulder plate, I think it zooms in, eventually you see that I'm really making it look like metal. I painted that all in with precision. So it's, the only way you're going to make materials and surfaces look like what they look is by getting references of them. Unless you've studied metal so many times, you know how metal looks, or how leather looks and works, and that's great if you can just do that from your imagination. But I have painted metal quite a few times myself on things, but it's not a hard thing. It's just that it's always good to have a reference of it as well, and a different reference. Collect a lot of references of what metal armor looks like, simply because you can use it to apply to your paintings. You know, you don't copy it, but you just kind of go, well, this is how lighting affects metal surfaces. It has really, really bright spots, and then really bright highlights, whites, and then it has greys, a whole range of greys and stuff like that. Yeah, and what I've also done is, because metal is reflective, if you have a look at the metal on the right, his shoulder plate, I actually added in the yellow light, the reflected light from the sun. So he's going to have yellow. There's going to be yellows in it, because if you look at the metal on the photo references, it's reflecting a lot of blues, because the guy's wearing a blue cloth or whatever he's wearing, blue leather, a blue material of some sort. So metal usually reflects the color. So I've gone and done that with the sword as well. I've actually gone in and I'm looking at how metal works. It's a very flat colors, very flat surfaces. So I'm painting the sword also like that, you know, matching the sword with the shoulder plate so that the surface looks the same, you know. And look, I did grab a little bit of texture of the metal plate, so I'm not gonna lie, actually I did use a bit of a photo, but it's just that little bit of metal plate that I liked, and I dumped that in. And I didn't keep that in there, I actually like dumped it in, I overlaid it, and then you can see I played around with the lighting of it, and then I cleaned it up. I got rid of stuff that I didn't like, you know. I just added it, I clone stamped it in. As you can see, I changed the color, I did a color balance on the metal, I painted it back over it, and I actually made it fit. So I kind of did, you know, I still painted it, and then I added some photo texture to it as well, and then I added more and more and just blended it all together, and then it came to life. And it was just, you know, I actually painted that like on top of the whole thing in the end, but it looks really believable, you know. He's got spikes and stuff, and the spikes I actually had to paint them as well, and I had to like clean them up. I actually had to make them look more, I suppose, smoother, though it had too much texture in there, you know. They had to be more of a smooth surface to look more like metal. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that, you know. I think I added some more lighting to it. I went and I did a color balance to the whole thing, to the whole goblin, because he wasn't looking red enough. He needed to look more red and orange, similar to the environment. So we've added red and oranges to him and the whole thing, even the metal armor. And that, you know, from time to time you're going to be doing color balances to make sure things fit in the scene well. And I pulled out a sword as well, pulled out a sword reference, and I'm looking at the sword and I'm thinking, hey, is this how a sword works? You know, I actually, you know, I look at the sword, the metallic surfaces, and I'm applying exactly the same colors and the values to this my sword that I'm painting for the goblin. So you can see there I'm getting rid of stuff and doing stuff. Yeah, so I've gone in here and just adding a lot more detail. you know, painting in the leather, painting in more texture, using a textured brush, you know, and also making the leather look like it's damaged, you know, on that handcuff, you know, giving it scratches and marks and stuff like that. And you can see there's actually a textured brush that I've got. It's like a dot texture, and I'm just putting that all over the character, you know, over the metal surface, over the cape, you know, over the sword as well. You know, it adds more texture and sheen to it. And again, I pulled out another sword. I didn't just use one sword for reference. I'm looking at many swords to get that sword right, because I was still struggling with that sword. And just using different colors. So yeah, there's been a big, this is towards the end now, where I've done a colour balance to the whole scene, to the character, to the environment, also adding just, this is the final point where we're just adding a lot of information to the whole scene, getting rid of any I suppose issues with the scene, you know, any things that are wrong. I do change the actual texture of the world as well a lot. So you can see I'm adding a bit of a textured brush, just some rock texture. And this is why I don't add photos to the environment, because the textured brushes give enough of a feel of rocks. But yeah, I was pretty happy at this point with the whole scene. You know, I added some more information to the jawline, like the jawline needed some texture and shadows, and the character needed more texture and information on his face, and we've just gone in and, you know, the rocks at the moment look very soft, but I actually hardened up the rocks, did a desaturation, and just because the rocks were more saturated than the character, so I just, you know, cleaned up the rocks as much as I could, added, you know, lines in it to make it look more like cracked rocks, you know, and hard surfaces, because the rocks were looking soft in general, and that was because they were very rough, you know, and they were just almost like a placeholder while I did the character, so I knew what the character was, the world that it was sitting on in, you know, and that to make sure that the actual character fit in the environment really well. Yeah, it was a bit there's a bit of work in making sure things look like what they're meant to look like. You got to make sure rocks look like rocks. Metal looks like metal. Cloth looks like cloth. Armor looks like armor, or whatever it is. Leather looks like leather. Hair looks like hair. And that just takes practice, and studies, and just getting used to doing that over and over and over again. But yeah, here I'm just cleaning up the rocks, making them look sharp. I've got almost like stepping stones for the path in the background. And yeah, and I've actually started to smooth out some of them too, because sometimes you can have too much texture. So you really need to refine and define the rock. As you can see, the rock that he's standing on, I've really defined that, so it looks like he's standing on some sort of texture. So sorry for all the noises in the background. We've got the studio I run here from home. I do actually have a few people that work for me. So I've got a guy in America that helps me, and then I have Christy that helps me with the marketing of the Patreon and helps me with getting everything done. So we do have a few people that are helping out to make Patreon happen as well. So this is pretty cool. I think like right now I was pretty happy with the whole environment. I was just noodling the whole environment, fixing that up, because the character was done. In my view, the character was pretty much done. The only thing I do at the end is I touch up the cape. I had enough shadows and feet. I pretty much did everything really well. I think I was happy with it. And I think it was a solid portfolio piece. For me, I think it's great. Great looking goblin. A really good looking goblin for the comic. And I was really happy at it at this point. So like here I'm just, playing around with the environment and having a lot of fun with the environment. And I was also getting the rocks, really perfecting the rocks, really making sure that they look like rocks. They didn't look like soft pieces of clay or something, because if you get that wrong, it's not going to be good. So you can see here I've added like a lot of shadows on the other side of the rocks, and played around with the shapes to make the points of the rocks kind of lead into the goblin more as well, and give it, like, I suppose, variety of shapes as well, because like they're all looking sameish, and that's the thing when you're designing environments. You don't want to make things. Nature doesn't look symmetrical and the same. You kind of have to break things up a lot. So I fixed up all the rock textures. I fixed up everything so that way nothing is sameish, and just added in a lot of shadows, hard lines, very hard surfaces. You really want to show it's a hard surface. It's a rock, and it's just a habit that you have, is when you paint, you kind of just, you just paint what's from your imagination, but I actually was looking at rocks. yeah, so it's just, you know, refining those rock shapes, adding variety into the rocks, you know, and even different texture into there. Because if you make the whole environment look the same, it kind of gets a bit boring. So you want to really, that's what I was doing, was just adding variety and making sure things, you know, worked well. But I think that's about it. You know, all I can say is, you know, I just was adding, as you can see, I'm just painting the environment, making it look really good. All I did was I added magic coming out of the earth, and that was part of my story. He's not casting a spell or anything, but just to make the story, why, you know, make it all sound clear what I did. You know, at the bottom there was, when I painted in a minute, but I basically painted rune magic, almost like rune or stone magic, because out of the earth, you know, dream magic comes about. There's dream wells, there's, you know, where there's dream energy comes out of the water. It also comes out of the rocks or the stones, and these goblins are defending the dream magic, you know, the dream energy. And in the comic book universe, dream energy is also in some of the gods and some of the characters. Some of the major dragons, they become endangered and they become hunted down because they have really, they're dragon gods, or they're descendants of dragon gods, and so their dream energy that they have is harvestable, you know, and dark mages the evil mages are really hunting them down to harvest their energy. You know, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but you know, so the goblins, you know, people think the goblins are bad, but they're actually not bad. They're good. He's actually running at the viewer because he's defending his home, the caves and the rocks and the mountains. He's defending it, and yeah. So there's, as you see, there's all this dream energy coming out. This orange stuff. It's not lava. It's just dream magic coming out of the earth. And dream magic has many different colors, you know, because it's from the dreams. And here I just tweaked the environment, the levels of the environment, so that the character pops out more. You know, I flipped it back into grayscale. At the end, I still flip on the grayscale mode. You know, I do that by creating a black and white layer above and put it in saturation mode. And I flick it on and off, and it lets me see what the picture looks like in black and white. Does the character still pop out? Does the environment look good? Do the values of the environment work? You know? And so that's what you always got to check. You know, do the values work right up into the end? Is there still a focal point? What are you looking at? So you can see there's white. The goblin's quite dark, but there's like a white halo in the sky behind him to make him pop out. And that's how a lot of fantasy art works, especially with trading card games like Magic the Gathering and all that. You know, it does work that way, you know, that where you have the character has, you know, I suppose contrast. It's, you know, you have your lightest lights and your darkest darks on the character, and then you have a contrasting background to make it pop out as well. And you can see I'm just still tweaking all the levels on the character and on the environment. And yeah, here, this stage here, I really do not need to say more. All that I really do at the end is I have another color dodge layer, because the earth magic, the dream magic coming out of the earth, that lighting does affect the character near his feet and up to his hands. So that is all I paint in a color dodge and a soft light layer. And all I'm really doing at the end is just making sure the rocks look like rocks. They look like hard surfaces. I'm using a hard brush, nothing fancy, just a hard brush. That's just you just pick a round brush, you put it on the hard setting, and I think you just look for the hard round brush and you paint and clean up everything. There's no tricks here. There's no I did add textured brushes before, but you have to get to the point where you've got to clean up everything with a refined brush. If you're looking for hard surfaces, you've got to use a hard brush. That's basically, in a nutshell, what you have to do. There's no cheats way around it, and you have to go in and fix up and noodle and tidy up everything, especially for illustration. As a concept, this was done hours ago, but as a finished illustration, you really need to refine and fix up stuff. And this all up probably took me about 3 or 4 days to complete, maybe a week. On and off, I had interruptions and I had client stuff to handle, and I had other things like the Patreon to do. But usually without any interruptions, it only takes a week for a painting to get done for me. But I like to spend more time on, especially if it's a really important client or it's a really awesome project. And that's basically it. I think, I hope that helps you all. You're all welcome to interact with me on Patreon. Ask me any questions about things, about the painting process or anything. As you can see, just tidying up everything, the rocks, the surfaces, the whole lot. The goblin, he's looking pretty cool. I mean, there's so much more you can always do. I tidy up the cape at the end. I get rid of those little curly bits on the cape. That goes as well. I thought that was a bit full on. And I looked at a cape from a Spartan, the 300 Spartan capes from cosplay. Like, I just found a cosplay version of it, and I just used that as reference to make sure the cape looked like a cape, because it wasn't looking like a cape. And really, it's just at this stage, it's just the easy part. It's the fun part. It's just the refining everything, making it look really, really awesome. And it's funny, you can be there forever playing around with color balances and playing around with levels adjustments and stuff like that, forever doing it. As you can see, I'm doing it now, fixing it up so things pop out better. But it's just up to you. It's you as the artist. It really doesn't make a difference to the public. If they like a painting, they're going to like the painting. No matter what you do to it. If it's a popular subject matter, people want to see mermaids versus dragons, then the mermaids are going to be what people are going to buy at a convention. So no matter how much you tweak a painting, it really doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference, but if it's a subject matter that people don't want, on their wall or to use for a particular thing, then it's not going to be used. Here I'm just playing around. What would it look like if it was a portrait artwork, not a landscape work as well? But I didn't do that. And this is where you see the fire magic comes in out of the ground, or the dream magic, should I say. I keep on saying fire. But this is where I added more, lighting around the ground, around the feet. And this is where I'm cleaning up the cape. Just you can see what I've done. I added a color balance and levels to it, so I made him a bit more saturated so that he stands out versus the actual environment. And I also did an overlay layer on his skin, so it looks like his skin's really glossy and slimy, or almost oily or translucent. And I suppose I was really happy with it at this point. This is pretty much finished, just tidying it all up. I don't think I have anything else to say. Yeah, I was pretty happy with this. It's pretty much done. No sort of yeah, I was very happy. I was actually really happy with this in the end. You know, and that's the thing with art. You know, you just got to be happy with what you do. You know, and that's the only advice I can give you. You have to kind of stick to subject. You know, just some art advice for you all is stick to subject matter that you're comfortable with. That you, it's not that comfortable with, but things that you like to paint. You know, sometimes it's good to get out of your comfort zone, but you know, don't say yes if you want to be a professional artist. Don't say yes to things that you really don't want to do unless you're forced to. That can happen. But you know, keep on. You know, if you like to paint superheroes, go and paint superheroes. If you like painting science fiction stuff, go paint science fiction. If you're into horror, you're only going to paint. The best work you paint is going to be the stuff that you love to paint, the topics that you love. And for me, it's fantasy. You know, it's on the top list. The second list is horror, and the third is sci-fi. But I must admit, I haven't actually painted a lot of sci-fi to say whether I hate it or dislike it. I don't dislike it. I actually wouldn't mind painting some aliens. You know, alien monsters. I think would be something that which would touch on fantasy, which is something that I would really be into painting. So everything was saved. I was having a problem with saving the file. The file was huge. It was 2 gig, but I ended up saving it all okay in the end. But other than that, I'll just leave. I think we've got a few minutes left. I just want to say thank you again for supporting the art. I hope this was invaluable to you. I hope I've covered a lot. I hope you can see that, you know, this video does help you. You know, I hope it gives you ideas on how to paint and how I put things together. You know, how you know, hopefully you can see that you just got to be tenacious with art, and you have to have resilience, and you also have to be the type of person that persists with something, and you have to build up your tolerance. Like, I didn't have the tolerance I had to paint this goblin. I didn't have the same tolerance when I painted the Orc Shaman. Orc Shaman was painted in 2012. I got into Imagine Effects. My Orc Shaman, which you've probably seen on my DeviantArt, I did that in less time, and I was just over it within 2 days. You know, this goblin painting is a way better painting. I feel, you know, I've grown as an artist. This is way better than my Orc. But Orcs are more popular, so I sell more Orcs. That's just the way the world works. So, you know, just, you know, if there's anything you want, you know, that you can think of that I haven't covered in the talk, you know, just send me a question via Patreon. You know, this is why Patreon's been set up. It's been set up as a service so that if you've got anything that you're struggling with your art, or you've got tips or questions of me, got any requests, as long as it's not unreasonable, I'll do my best to help you out. And it's about setting up this community where I can help people out and pass on what I know. And I'm not scared to pass on what I know, because it's not like you're going to steal my ideas or you're going to copy what I do, because everyone does art their own way. And honestly, if you want to copy me, good luck, because it just requires a lot of work. That's all it is. There's no magic button. There's no, you know, in Photoshop, you can see how I'm still noodling the teeth right at the end. There's no, you know, speed up your painting process button in Photoshop, or with acrylic painting if you're using acrylic paints. It's just, you've got to get in there and do the work. That's how painting works. So this is why I'm happy to share everything I know, because at the end of the day, you still have to do the work. I can give you as much information as I can, but you have to do the work. You know, I'm showing you all my process, everything how I work, but it's all on you. And at the same time, though, you know, if you are struggling, you're hitting blocks, mental blocks with your art, you know, just send me a message, and I can maybe suggest ideas on where you can, you know, improve, or how you can get better. But other than that, just want to thank you all again, and looking forward to all the stuff. We have hit the $500 tier, past the first milestone, so we're doing voting now. It's really exciting. And the fact that you all can vote on some cool topics, and we're going to try and mix it up. We're going to do fantasy the first one, then we're going to do public domain, so stuff from Alice or from Wizard of Oz, or public domain characters, that we can paint. And then next month will be fantasy again, then we'll have horror, then we may have a sci-fi month. But thank you so much, and I hope you like the final painting. See you next month. Bye.